The story opens on a blistering hot day in a small frontier town, the kind of place where dust swirls around wooden sidewalks and the air smells faintly of hay, sweat, and livestock. The town square is crowded with farmers, ranchers, and townsfolk, all gathered for the weekly auction. Piles of goods, barrels of corn, livestock pens, and wagons form a chaotic backdrop. But today, among the livestock, one figure draws more attention than any horse or cow, the young native girl, Ayanna, standing tall and unflinching despite the jeers and whispered comments of the crowd. Unlike the others who have been sold or traded before, she refuses to show fear, refusing to beg or plead for a better fate. Her defiance radiates from her posture and her sharp, unwavering gaze. The auctioneer, a portly man with a booming voice, hammers the gavel rhythmically, calling out prices for horses, pigs, and cattle. When he turns to Ayanna, his tone is less enthusiastic, almost dismissive, as if expecting a meek, frightened child. The crowd murmurs, some scoffing at her resistance, others intrigued by it. She meets their stares with cold, unblinking eyes, her jaw set firmly. "You'll regret this. I won't obey," she mutters under her breath, though enough people hear it for the words to stir a ripple of murmurs through the audience. Her declaration is bold, dangerous even, and it shocks many who assumed she would simply accept her fate. Jack, a rugged cowboy in his early 30s, stands slightly apart from the crowd. He's a man accustomed to the rough frontier, the heat of the sun, and the weight of a loaded gun. But Ayanna's presence catches his attention differently. There's a spark of curiosity in his eyes as he watches her, a mix of amusement and challenge. While other bidders discuss prices for livestock or mutter to each other, Jack sees the defiance in her as a puzzle, a challenge, and perhaps a test of his own patience. Without much ceremony, he steps forward and bids $2, a laughably low amount compared to the murmured estimates of her worth in the room. The auctioneer pauses, eyebrows raised, but the gavel comes down. Jack has bought the girl. The crowd reacts in predictable ways. Some laugh, mocking Jack for buying what they consider an unmanageable girl for a paltry sum, while others shake their heads at Ayanna as if she has brought this upon herself. But Ayanna doesn't flinch. She glares at Jack, her body tense, voice cold, and steady. "You'll regret this." "I won't obey." Her words hang in the air like a challenge, daring him to break her spirit. Jack smirks, a flicker of intrigue crossing his otherwise stoic face. He's met stubbornness before, but this is different. This is defiance fused with intelligence, with fire. He doesn't respond with threats or punishment. Instead, he simply motions for her to follow him, assuming she will comply under the social expectation that she must. But the moment is electric with tension because Ayanna refuses to be cowed. She steps back slightly, crossing her arms, as if to say that while she must move with him, she will never surrender her will. The scene is set, a vivid clash of wills in a world ruled by survival and hierarchy. The auction isn't just a transaction of property, it's a symbolic arena, showing the collision of cultures, gender roles, and individual spirit. Ayanna's defiance immediately frames her as more than a victim. She is a character with agency, courage, and a sharp mind, foreshadowing the intense power struggles that will follow. Jack, on the other hand, is revealed as a man intrigued by challenge, morally complex, and capable of both roughness and curiosity about people he cannot easily control. By the time they leave the auction, the tension is palpable. Dust swirls behind the wagon as Jack drives away, Ayanna's eyes never leaving him. The first part of the story has accomplished more than introducing characters. It has established a battlefield of willpower, setting the stage for a conflict-driven relationship that will define the narrative. The ride back to the ranch is tense from the start. Dust kicks up from the hooves of the horses as Jack drives his wagon through the narrow sun-baked trails leading out of town. Ayanna sits stiffly on the bench beside him, her posture rigid, eyes sharp and unblinking. The heat of the midday sun beats down on them, but the tension between them feels hotter, a constant simmering undercurrent. Ayana's arms are crossed, and every so often she shoots Jack a glare that could cut through steel. Her defiance has not softened in the slightest since the auction, and she makes it abundantly clear that she will not be anyone's obedient servant. Jack, accustomed to a life of authority and control on his ranch, is momentarily thrown off by her unyielding spirit. He tries casual conversation, testing the waters, asking simple questions about her hometown, her family, or her life before the auction. Each question is met with a sarcastic remark, a cold stare, or a flat refusal to answer. She mocks his attempts at small talk, calling him the fool who thinks he can buy obedience, or telling him plainly that he will find her impossible to control. Jack can't help but be both frustrated and intrigued. Most people he meets are pliable or intimidated. Ayana is neither. The atmosphere in the wagon becomes a silent battleground. Every glance, every slight movement is charged with unspoken challenges. When Jack attempts to offer her water from the jug, she refuses, turning her face away. When he tries to guide the conversation toward practical matters, like the work she needs to do on the ranch, she counters with sharp wit, questioning why she should follow orders at all. Her defiance is not just childish rebellion, it is deliberate, calculated, and fearless. It forces Jack to recognize that she is not just resisting him. She is asserting her own agency in a world that has tried to strip it away. As the miles stretch behind them, Jack observes her more closely. He notices the subtle intelligence in her eyes, the way she watches the horses, studies the landscape, and seems to take mental notes of every detail. She may be young, but she is alert and perceptive, qualities that might serve her well on the harsh frontier and perhaps make her a formidable challenge for him. Despite his attempts to maintain a commanding presence, he finds himself respecting, in a begrudging way, her refusal to submit. Ayana, meanwhile, senses this scrutiny and meets it with equal measure, deliberately keeping her movements confident, her words sharp, never giving him the satisfaction of seeing fear. The journey becomes more than a physical passage. It is a test of wills. Each bump in the road, each passing gust of wind, feels amplified by the unspoken war between them. Jack realizes that breaking her with force would be dangerous, not just morally, but practically. Ayana's spirit is too strong, and she is clever enough to resist in ways that could make the work difficult or even perilous. For the first time, Jack is confronted with the limits of his usual methods of control. The girl's defiance is not mere obstinacy. It is a challenge to his assumptions about power, obedience, and respect. By the time the ranch comes into view, the tension has evolved. There is no resolution, no surrender, but a grudging acknowledgement of each other's strengths. Jack recognizes that he has acquired a companion who will not be easy to manage, while Ayana understands that Jack is a force to be reckoned with, but not an enemy in the conventional sense. Their journey back from the auction is a crucible, forging the initial dynamics of their relationship, a mix of frustration, curiosity, and the faintest glimmer of mutual respect. Part 2 closes with the wagon rolling into the ranch yard, the sun beginning to dip toward the horizon, casting long shadows across the dusty land. Ayana's glare does not waver, and Jack's expression remains unreadable, but both know that the real challenge, the battle of wills and survival, is only just beginning. The stage is set for confrontations, tests of skill, and the slow, tense development of a relationship that will defy expectations on both sides. The days following the auction reveal just how unforgiving frontier life can be, especially for someone like Ayana, who has been thrust into a world of hard labor, authority, and constant physical demands. From the moment she sets foot on the ranch, it becomes clear that this is no place for idleness or weakness. Jack's ranch is a sprawling, sun-beaten expanse of land dotted with corrals, barns, and grazing livestock stretching out to hills that shimmer gold under the relentless sun. The work here is grueling, tending to the horses, mending fences, hauling water, and tending to crops. To most newcomers, this would be intimidating, but for Ayanna, the challenge is compounded by her unshakable refusal to submit. Jack wastes no time expecting her to start chores, yet she resists. The first morning, he hands her a bucket and tells her to fetch water from the well. Ayanna's response is a sharp refusal, her tone icy. "I do what I choose," she snaps, her eyes daring him to force compliance. Jack's first instinct is to assert his authority, to push, threaten, or coerce, but he quickly realizes that intimidation will not work. She is too clever, too unyielding, and perhaps even too proud to allow herself to be dominated. Her resistance is not mere stubbornness. It is a conscious effort to retain control over herself in a situation where she has none. Despite her defiance, Ayanna is surprisingly capable. She may resist Jack's orders, but she proves adept at the physical tasks required of the ranch. She lifts heavy water buckets with ease, navigates the tangled pens without tripping, and displays a surprising familiarity with horses and animals that makes Jack pause. Her skill forces him to reconsider his initial impressions. She is not helpless, and her defiance is balanced by competence. This combination of rebellion and skill sparks a mixture of frustration and admiration in Jack. He cannot simply dismiss her as a problem. She is a force to be reckoned with. The tension between them grows with each passing day. Ayanna openly mocks Jack when she sees him struggling with tasks, pointing out mistakes or offering sarcastic advice. When he attempts to give instructions, she responds with wit or silence, making it clear that she refuses to follow blindly. Their exchanges are electric, often ending in verbal sparring that leaves Jack simultaneously irritated and intrigued. The other ranch hands, who watch these interactions from the sidelines, shake their heads or chuckle, sensing the unpredictable nature of this new dynamic. Even as she resists, Ayanna begins to learn the rhythm of the ranch. She studies the animals, understands the patterns of work, and begins anticipating Jack's instructions, not out of obedience, but to maintain her independence and avoid unnecessary confrontation. This shows a growing intelligence and adaptability, highlighting that her defiance is not recklessness but strategic. Jack notices this, a grudging respect forming amidst his frustration. He is used to controlling those around him, but Ayanna is different. She challenges his authority while proving she belongs in the physical and mental space of the ranch. By the end of the first week, a fragile, unspoken balance emerges. Jack begins to recognize that he cannot bend Ayanna through force or intimidation, and Ayanna understands that Jack is not entirely cruel despite his gruff exterior. The ranch becomes a crucible, testing her resilience, patience, and wit, while forcing Jack to confront the limits of his authority and the need to negotiate rather than dominate. Their relationship is still defined by tension, conflict, and stubborn pride, but seeds of mutual acknowledgement and respect are beginning to take root. Part 3 closes with a quiet, reflective moment. As the sun dips behind the hills, Ayanna leans against a fence, watching the horses graze, and Jack surveys the work of the day. Both are exhausted, both wary, yet both aware that this is only the beginning of a challenging, complicated relationship. The stage is set for deeper confrontations, growing trust, and the slow evolution of a bond forged in defiance, skill, and survival. Tension between Jack and Ayanna escalates quickly, and the first true confrontation comes unexpectedly. It's a sweltering afternoon, and Jack needs her help to move a stubborn, temperamental horse from one pen to another. He assumes this will be a straightforward task, but he underestimates her stubbornness and quick thinking. When he instructs her to stand on one side of the pen and guide the animal, she shakes her head and responds with a defiant glare. "I'm not doing it your way," she says flatly. Her tone is calm but laced with challenge. Jack, already frustrated by her previous defiance, tightens his jaw and insists. The verbal exchange escalates quickly, each refusing to yield. The clash is more than words. It becomes physical. Ayanna steps closer to the horse, carefully observing its behavior, making subtle movements that Jack hadn't considered. When he tries to intervene, she sidesteps him, asserting control over the situation. Her instincts are sharp, her understanding of the animal's mood precise, and Jack realizes she is not just resisting him, she knows what she's doing. For the first time, Jack is forced to acknowledge that she cannot be broken through anger, authority, or intimidation. Her defiance is strategic, almost fearless, and it infuriates him because it challenges everything he believes about control on his ranch. The struggle intensifies as the horse, sensing the tension, reacts unpredictably. Ayanna's quick thinking prevents what could have been an accident, guiding the animal safely while Jack watches, partially relieved but also humiliated. The experience leaves both of them shaken but undeniably aware of each other's strengths. Jack recognizes her courage, resourcefulness, and refusal to submit, while Ayanna understands that Jack is formidable, physically strong, and quick to act when needed. They both gain a clearer understanding of their opponent. Each has power in different ways. The verbal sparring doesn't end with the task. Later, as they rest near the barn, Jack attempts to assert his authority, reminding her that she is on his land and must follow his rules. Ayanna counters with a sharp, almost playful retort, challenging his assumptions about ownership and obedience. "You may have bought me for $2, but you don't own my will," she says, her voice steady and unwavering. Jack feels the sting of her words but also a strange admiration. This exchange cements the fact that their relationship will be a constant power struggle, not one-sided domination. The first clash also sets a tone for mutual growth. Jack starts to see that Ayanna's resistance is not personal rebellion, but an expression of intelligence and self-preservation. Her insistence on maintaining control over her own actions forces him to rethink how he interacts with others, especially those he underestimates. For Ayanna, the clash confirms that Jack is neither simple nor predictable, and that to survive on the ranch and maintain her independence, she must be clever, bold, and unafraid to challenge him. By the end of Part 4, both characters are changed. Jack, though frustrated, gains a begrudging respect for Ayanna's courage and skill. He begins to realize that domination and fear are not the only ways to command respect. Ayanna, meanwhile, feels a cautious recognition of Jack's strength, realizing that while he is an obstacle, he is also someone whose abilities she cannot ignore. The clash solidifies their dynamic, a fiery, tension-filled relationship built on defiance, respect, and the delicate balance of power. The day concludes with a quiet, almost uneasy truce. Neither yields completely, but both have learned something essential about the other. The first major confrontation establishes the stakes, setting up a series of escalating challenges, tests of skill, and moments of mutual understanding that will continue to define their complex and evolving relationship on the harsh frontier. After the first intense clash on the ranch, the rigid walls of defiance between Jack and Ayanna begin to show subtle cracks. Part 5 shifts focus from confrontation to a more intimate, revealing moment, providing the first glimpse of vulnerability that humanizes both characters and adds depth to their relationship. This chapter occurs during the late afternoon when the oppressive heat of the day begins to give way to the cool golden glow of sunset, softening the harshness of the ranch's landscape and creating a space for reflection. The incident begins with Ayanna struggling with a minor injury or exhaustion from the laborious ranch work. Perhaps she missteps while hauling water, twisting her ankle, or develops a sudden bout of fever from the relentless sun and physical strain. She attempts to conceal her discomfort, maintaining her usual air of defiance, But Jack notices subtle signs: a wince, a limp, or an unusually quiet demeanor. For the first time, he sees that her unyielding exterior masks real fragility. This moment catches him off guard. He is accustomed to seeing people either obey him or fail entirely, but Ayana's resilience hides a human vulnerability that he hasn't encountered before. Jack approaches cautiously, unsure how to react. He has no interest in exploiting her weakness but feels an involuntary impulse to ensure she is safe. Ayana, however, bristles at the attention. She refuses to accept help at first, maintaining her defiance with a sharp retort, "I don't need you." But beneath the words, there is a subtle tremor, a silent acknowledgement that she cannot fully manage this on her own. This juxtaposition of strength and vulnerability creates a powerful emotional tension, compelling Jack to engage in a way that is different from their usual battles of will. During this interaction, Ayana allows a fleeting glimpse into her past, a story of hardship, loss, or displacement that reveals why her defiance is so deeply ingrained. It is not mere stubbornness. It is a shield forged by necessity, a survival mechanism shaped by experiences that Jack cannot fully imagine. Hearing this, Jack experiences an unexpected empathy. He begins to understand that her rebellion is rooted not in disrespect or arrogance, but in a hard-won self-preservation and dignity. This insight challenges his own assumptions and forces him to reconsider the dynamics of their relationship. The two share a quiet, tense moment where words are minimal, but understanding is growing. Jack offers practical help, perhaps a bandage, water, or assistance moving safely, but does so without condescension, respecting her autonomy. Ayana, though still maintaining her pride, senses that Jack's actions are not about asserting control, but about genuine concern. This subtle distinction is crucial. It begins to erode the black and white adversarial perception they have of each other. By the end of the encounter, both characters emerge changed. Ayana's vulnerability, though fleeting and carefully guarded, opens a crack in her armor, allowing Jack to see her not just as a defiant girl, but as a capable, complex human being shaped by hardship. Jack, in turn, recognizes that strength is not merely physical or rooted in authority. It can coexist with vulnerability, and sometimes vulnerability commands respect in ways sheer defiance cannot. This chapter also plants seeds for emotional development. While their relationship is still defined by tension and power struggles, the glimpse of vulnerability introduces the potential for empathy, understanding, and eventually, a more nuanced connection. It foreshadows moments where trust and mutual reliance will become necessary for survival on the ranch, hinting that their bond may evolve beyond conflict into something deeper and more complicated. As the sun sets behind the hills, casting long shadows across the ranch, both Jack and Ayana are left in reflective silence. Neither speaks much, but an unspoken acknowledgement hangs in the air. Beneath the layers of defiance and authority lies the possibility of mutual respect, recognition, and even connection. The glimpse of vulnerability marks the first turning point in their relationship, signaling that the coming chapters will explore not only battles of will, but the complexities of human emotion, trust, and understanding. By this point in the story, Jack and Ayana's relationship has settled into a tense equilibrium, neither fully adversarial nor fully cooperative. Part 6 explores how they begin testing each other's limits, not just through direct confrontations, but through subtle power plays, clever challenges, and moments that reveal their intelligence and resourcefulness. Their mutual testing is a natural evolution of their dynamic. Ayana's defiance pushes Jack to reconsider his authority, and Jack's experience and confidence force Ayana to think strategically about how to maintain her independence. The chapter opens with a seemingly ordinary day on the ranch, but the air is charged with anticipation. Ayana, already familiar with the routines of ranch life, starts asserting herself in small but deliberate ways. She rearranges tools in a way that complicates Jack's work, or handles a stubborn animal differently than he instructed, knowing it will elicit a reaction. Jack, for his part, notices these small acts of rebellion and chooses not to punish her immediately. Instead, he observes, testing her patience, decision-making, and ability to adapt. This creates a subtle game of wits. Every action and reaction is a move in a silent contest of control and skill. One example of these mutual challenges occurs during horse training. Jack assigns her the task of breaking in a particularly wild colt. Ayana refuses to follow his exact method, instead employing her own careful approach. The colt responds better to her technique than it would have to Jack's. Jack is frustrated but also impressed. He realizes she is learning quickly and applying her intuition to solve problems. For Ayana, the exercise is an opportunity to assert her competence and demonstrate that her defiance is not weakness but strength. Each success is a small victory, reinforcing her independence and forcing Jack to acknowledge her abilities. Their verbal sparring continues alongside these practical tests. Ayana teases Jack, pointing out mistakes or questioning his decisions. Jack counters with dry humor or pointed remarks, testing her resolve and patience. These exchanges are playful yet edged with tension, each one a subtle probe of the other's limits. Over time, these interactions evolve from mere conflict into a form of mutual respect. Both recognize that the other is clever, capable, and unwilling to be easily dominated, a realization that lays the foundation for a deeper, more complex connection. Another layer of mutual challenge emerges through physical tests. Ayana, though smaller and younger, is surprisingly strong and agile. She sets small traps or clever obstacles for Jack during chores or rides, forcing him to problem-solve creatively. Jack, in turn, sets tasks that test her endurance, judgment, and courage. These exercises are not explicitly hostile. They are a way for both to gauge the other's strengths while maintaining their pride and independence. Each challenge becomes a game of observation and strategy, allowing both characters to learn about each other's limits and capabilities. The key to this chapter is that the challenges are reciprocal. Jack is no longer simply trying to dominate, he is engaging with a worthy opponent. Ayana is no longer merely resisting for the sake of pride. She is actively asserting herself and shaping the relationship on her own terms. This mutual testing transforms their conflict from a simple struggle of authority into a dynamic interplay of intellect, skill, and courage. It strengthens their individual characters while simultaneously deepening the bond of understanding and respect between them. By the end of Part 6, the tone of their relationship has shifted subtly. While they still clash, the sparks of confrontation are now intertwined with admiration and cautious camaraderie. Both Jack and Ayana recognize that the other is resilient, clever, and capable of unexpected ingenuity. These mutual challenges set the stage for situations in which they must rely on one another, laying the groundwork for cooperation, trust, and deeper emotional connection in the chapters to follow. The Frontier Ranch, with all its danger, labor, and unpredictability, becomes the arena where their evolving relationship is both tested and forged. The uneasy equilibrium between Jack and Ayana is abruptly disrupted when an external threat arrives at the ranch, forcing them to confront danger together and revealing new layers of trust, skill, and reliance. Up until this point, their relationship has been defined by verbal sparring, subtle power plays, and mutual challenges. But the arrival of a tangible threat elevates the stakes and transforms their dynamic from rivalry to reluctant partnership. The threat could take several forms: a band of marauding outlaws, a rival rancher with a vendetta, or even a natural disaster such as a sudden storm or wild animal attack, but the essential effect is the same. It demands cooperation, courage, and quick thinking from both characters. The chapter opens with the first signs of trouble. Perhaps the wind carries the distant sound of hooves that shouldn't be there, or smoke rises from the edge of the property. Ayanna, ever perceptive and alert, notices these anomalies before Jack does. For a brief moment, their usual roles reverse. She becomes the observer and the warning, the one prepared to act while Jack assesses the situation with his customary pragmatism. This moment underscores her intelligence and resourcefulness, traits that have been developed and honed through her defiance and previous challenges. When the threat materializes, a band of thieves attempting to steal livestock or threaten the ranch, both Jack and Ayanna must act immediately. Jack's first instinct is to confront the danger head-on, relying on his strength, experience, and firearms. Ayanna, however, uses strategy and cunning, finding ways to outmaneuver, distract, or warn him and the ranch hands. Their initial coordination is rough. There are moments of miscommunication, tension, and the lingering sparks of rivalry. But necessity forces them to synchronize their actions, combining Jack's brute strength with Ayanna's agility, foresight, and quick thinking. The crisis also tests their ability to trust each other. Jack must rely on Ayanna's judgment in ways he never anticipated, recognizing that her independent thinking is not a liability but an asset. Ayanna, in turn, must trust that Jack will protect her and handle the immediate physical danger, even as she continues to assert her own agency. This mutual reliance, forged under duress, begins to break down the barriers of animosity and pride that have defined their relationship up to this point. They start to understand that cooperation does not diminish their independence, but enhances their effectiveness in the face of danger. As the threat unfolds, their interactions reveal subtle but important shifts in their dynamic. Jack allows Ayanna to take decisive actions, even when they contradict his instincts, and she respects his experience and authority in critical moments. Their verbal sparring fades into tactical communication, concise commands, and split-second decisions that rely on an unspoken understanding between them. Each moment of success reinforces the idea that they are stronger together than apart, and the tension between defiance and authority begins to transform into a fragile but genuine partnership. After the immediate danger is resolved, whether the thieves retreat, the storm passes, or the wild animal is driven off, Jack and Ayanna are left to process the aftermath. The adrenaline fades, but the lessons remain. They have learned each other's capabilities, strengths, and limits under pressure, and their mutual respect grows deeper. Ayanna recognizes that Jack's authority, while often rigid, is tempered by his courage and willingness to protect. And Jack realizes that Ayanna's defiance is matched by intelligence, bravery, and insight that he cannot ignore. Part 7 closes with a quiet, reflective moment as the sun sets on the ranch. The threat has passed, but the experience has permanently altered their relationship. No longer simply adversaries locked in a battle of wills, they have glimpsed the potential for true partnership, one built not on dominance or submission, but on respect, shared responsibility, and the acknowledgement that each brings unique strengths to the table. The external threat has forced them to act as equals, laying the groundwork for deeper trust and cooperation in the chapters to come. After surviving the external threat, the dynamic between Jack and Ayanna begins to shift in subtle but significant ways. Part 8 explores how their shared experience in danger forces them to reassess authority, respect, and the balance of power on the ranch. Up until now, Jack has been the undisputed figure of control, expecting obedience, while Ayanna has maintained her independence through defiance and cleverness. But the recent crisis demonstrated that neither could thrive alone. Their partnership during the threat exposed each other's strengths and vulnerabilities, and now the balance of power begins to fluctuate, creating a more complex, layered relationship. The chapter opens in the immediate aftermath of the danger. The ranch is quiet but tense, with animals settling back into their pens and the workers recovering from the adrenaline of the day. Jack surveys the damage or the consequences of the encounter, noting where Ayana's quick thinking prevented a disaster. He cannot ignore that her independent judgment saved both his livestock and possibly lives. This realization begins to erode his instinct to dominate entirely. He recognizes that she is not a liability to be controlled, but an asset to be valued. For the first time, he begins to consider her as a partner rather than a subordinate, which subtly shifts the social dynamic between them. Ayana senses this change immediately. She notices the way Jack regards her, not with the impatience or frustration that previously defined their interactions, but with a mixture of respect and measured consideration. She tests this new balance carefully, pushing boundaries in small, deliberate ways, observing how he responds. When she questions a decision or suggests an alternative approach to ranch work, Jack listens instead of dismissing her outright. This change, though slight, signifies that the power struggle between them is no longer a simple contest of authority versus defiance. Instead, it is evolving into a negotiation of mutual influence. Their verbal sparring continues, but it carries a new tone. The sharpness of earlier confrontations is now tempered by an undercurrent of admiration. Ayana's teasing is no longer purely provocative. It challenges Jack in ways that sharpen his thinking and decision-making. Jack, in turn, responds not with irritation, but with recognition of her skill and intellect, occasionally acknowledging her contributions with brief nods or approving remarks. Each interaction reinforces the idea that they are learning from each other, that strength and leadership can be collaborative rather than unilateral. Physical tasks and ranch responsibilities also reflect the shifting power dynamic. Jack begins to involve Ayana more in decision-making, seeking her input on how to manage the livestock, repair fences, or plan for the next day's work. Ayana accepts these opportunities strategically, using her voice to assert her expertise without relinquishing her independence. The interplay between them is a dance of respect and influence. Jack wields experience and authority. Ayana wields intelligence and insight, and together they accomplish more than either could alone. This chapter also explores the psychological impact of these changes. Jack begins to question his previous assumptions about control, obedience, and the measure of respect, realizing that true leadership involves valuing the contributions of others, even those who defy him. Ayana, in turn, sees that independence does not always require isolation. Collaboration with the right person can be empowering rather than constraining. Their evolving relationship begins to blur the lines between adversary and ally, suggesting that the ongoing tension between them is not a weakness, but a source of strength. By the end of Part 8, the balance of power has clearly shifted from a rigid hierarchy to a more fluid, negotiated dynamic. Both Jack and Ayana are aware that they can challenge each other without jeopardizing the whole, that mutual respect can coexist with stubbornness, and that defiance and authority can be complementary rather than conflicting. The chapter closes with a quiet, reflective moment, perhaps a shared glance over the ranch at sunset or a silent acknowledgement of each other's contributions, signaling that their relationship has evolved from confrontation to cautious partnership. The stage is set for deeper trust, cooperation, and emotional complexity in the chapters that follow. The relationship between Jack and Ayana has evolved into a complex mix of respect, defiance, and reluctant cooperation. However, this progress introduces internal struggles for both characters. Whereas previous parts focused on external conflicts, ranch labor, verbal sparring, and physical threats, this section delves deeply into their inner emotional and moral landscapes. Both Jack and Ayana are forced to confront guilt, trust, and the consequences of past choices, which adds layers of depth to their characters and raises the stakes for the final resolution. For Jack, the inner conflict is rooted in morality and self-perception. Although he has treated Ayanna with relative fairness compared to the expectations of the frontier, he cannot escape the fact that he purchased her at auction, an act that would weigh heavily on anyone with conscience. He begins to question his own motivations. Was he drawn by challenge, curiosity, or a sense of ownership? Did he act with cruelty, necessity, or opportunism? These thoughts plague him during quiet moments on the ranch while mending fences, riding the perimeter, or watching the sunset. Jack wrestles with the knowledge that, regardless of how he treats her now, the foundation of their relationship began with an inherently immoral transaction. This internal struggle forces him to reflect on the type of man he wants to be and whether he can reconcile his actions with his emerging respect for Ayanna. Ayanna's inner conflict is equally compelling but rooted in survival and trust. She must navigate the paradox of her growing reliance on Jack for safety, resources, and protection, while simultaneously preserving her independence and resisting submission. She struggles with vulnerability, acknowledging that accepting help does not necessarily equate to surrendering her will. Additionally, she grapples with lingering trauma from her past, the circumstances that led to her being sold, the dangers she has endured, and the pervasive uncertainty about her future. Each act of cooperation with Jack brings internal tension. A part of her fears betrayal or exploitation, while another part recognizes the practical necessity of trust. This tug-of-war between caution and reliance adds emotional complexity to her character. The external dynamics of the ranch exacerbate these internal conflicts. Everyday tasks, feeding animals, repairing fences, or facing harsh weather require a level of cooperation that neither character is entirely comfortable with. Ayanna notices her own pride and defiance sometimes hinder necessary action, while Jack recognizes that his authority can strain or intimidate rather than inspire. These realizations force both of them to evaluate the cost of ego and pride against the benefits of mutual understanding. Their emotional growth is not linear. It is punctuated by missteps, misunderstandings, and moments of silent reflection. A key element of Part 9 is the subtle development of trust. Both characters must confront the fear that their dependence on one another could be exploited or betrayed. Jack fears that Ayanna might resent him for the past or undermine his authority, while Ayanna fears that relying on him could compromise her autonomy. The tension between vulnerability and self-protection drives intimate moments of reflection, where neither speaks aloud but both process the unspoken stakes of their relationship. This emotional negotiation reinforces that trust is earned, not demanded, and that moral awareness and integrity are just as important as physical skill or cleverness. By the end of Part 9, both Jack and Ayanna emerge with a greater understanding of themselves and each other. Jack's awareness of his own guilt and moral responsibilities tempers his authority with empathy. Ayanna's careful navigation of trust allows her to engage with Jack on terms that preserve her independence while fostering cooperation. The chapter closes with both characters quietly contemplating the journey ahead, their inner conflicts unresolved but guiding the trajectory of their evolving relationship. It sets the stage for the final resolution, where external and internal challenges will converge to define how they relate to one another in the long term. Brings the story to a critical juncture, resolving many of the tensions that have built throughout the previous chapters while leaving enough uncertainty to maintain suspense and intrigue. At this point, Jack and Ayanna have undergone a long, turbulent journey together, from an initial relationship defined by defiance, distrust, and raw survival to a more nuanced dynamic characterized by respect, cautious cooperation, and emotional complexity. This chapter serves as both a culmination of their struggles and a setup for potential future conflict, balancing closure with ambiguity. The chapter opens with a quiet, reflective morning on the ranch. The events of the previous external threat, mutual challenges, and shifting power dynamics have left both characters exhausted but contemplative. Jack surveys the land, noting the signs of progress and resilience: repaired fences, well-tended animals, and the subtle indications of Ayanna's contribution. He recognizes that her presence has fundamentally changed the ranch, not just in terms of labor, but in how he approaches leadership and collaboration. For the first time, he considers her a true partner in the daily struggles of frontier life rather than merely a defiant girl he must manage. Ayanna, for her part, is equally reflective. She observes Jack from a distance, noting his thoughtfulness and the moments where he refrains from asserting authority unnecessarily. She understands that while their relationship began with coercion and defiance, it has evolved into something more balanced, a partnership where her voice and agency carry weight. At the same time, she remains vigilant, aware that the delicate trust between them could be disrupted by missteps, misunderstandings, or external pressures. Her defiance is tempered, but not extinguished. She has learned the value of cooperation without surrendering her independence. The central event of the chapter involves a pivotal task or decision that requires them to work together, consolidating everything they have learned about each other. Perhaps a herd must be driven across difficult terrain, a storm threatens the crops, or another subtle threat emerges that demands careful planning and execution. This task functions as a test of their partnership. It requires Jack's experience, physical strength, and decisiveness, but also Ayanna's intelligence, intuition, and strategic thinking. Through their cooperation, they demonstrate the synergy that has gradually developed between them, illustrating how respect, trust, and mutual acknowledgement have replaced sheer defiance and domination. Even as they succeed, the resolution is not total. There remain lingering tensions, small disagreements, unspoken feelings, and uncertainties about the future. These unresolved threads maintain the story's edge, ensuring that the reader recognizes their relationship is still evolving. Jack may question the morality of his initial actions, and Ayanna may still struggle with vulnerability and trust, but both are fundamentally changed by their shared experiences. The resolution, therefore, is emotional and relational rather than plot conclusive, emphasizing growth and transformation over tidy closure. The chapter closes with a subtle but powerful moment of connection that highlights the evolution of their dynamic. Perhaps they exchange a brief glance that acknowledges respect and recognition, or a quiet conversation that conveys understanding without diminishing Ayanna's independence. The ending may hint at potential romance, deep emotional bonding, or simply a continuing partnership forged through adversity. Yet, it also leaves room for future tension. The frontier remains dangerous. Their personal histories are unresolved, and the balance of power is always delicate. This cliffhanger ensures that the story retains dramatic tension even as it reaches an emotional peak. In Part 10, the story achieves a satisfying narrative arc. The defiant, native girl and the rugged cowboy have moved from a relationship defined by coercion and rebellion to one defined by mutual respect, cautious trust, and acknowledgement of each other's strengths. The resolution emphasizes growth, cooperation, and emotional depth while leaving the future open-ended, allowing the characters and the readers to imagine the next chapters of their complex, evolving relationship. The final scene is simultaneously triumphant and tentative, capturing the essence of a story built on tension, resilience, and human connection in a harsh, unpredictable frontier world.